Welcome to another episode of VVIP interview. Today we have a special guest and special topic. Everyone talking about PR and communication and branding, and there is nothing best than the queen of PR, Maha Abouelenein.
Thank you for the introduction. I don't know about the queen part, but I love my communications.
Of course. You have to be the queen because 28 years of experience in media and communication, there is no one can be expert on this field.
Thank you so much for having me. You know, I'm lucky I get to talk about something I'm passionate about, and I'm so passionate about communications, and so it's really exciting to be here.
Actually, you earn it. You have 28 years experience in media and communication, so we cannot have less than a queen, you know?
Thank you so much.
So can you please give us an introduction about yourself?
Yeah, so I am American Egyptian. I have been in the Middle East since 1997, born and raised in the States. I've been doing communications my whole life, working for some of the best and top companies, not just consumer products companies, but tech companies and sports brands. And so I'm really thrilled to be here today, and I love what I do. I love communications, and I want other people to be passionate about communications. So talking about it makes me really happy.
So how actually your choice when it comes to university, it was you choose this field, or it was more, because that time it was not trendy, right?
So my undergraduate degree was in international business and marketing, and I did a minor in French, and then I did my master's degree in communications. And I always was just obsessed with the news business, like knowing information first. I always grew up dreaming as a little kid that I'd be like a correspondent, reporting live on the scene. I just was obsessed with information when I was a little girl. And so I studied communications, which is like the flip side of, being in the news industry was a flip side of being in PR. And I actually interned in college at the CBS affiliate in Minnesota. So I worked in a newsroom, and it was thrilling because you find things out before people find out, and you get to tell people the news and craft the narrative. And for me, that was just a thrill.
So how important is to have storytelling when it comes to PR?
Listen, the most important thing when you're trying to communicate is the message. What is the message? How can you convey it in a way that people understand it? How can you tell a story that really connects with people? And how can you tell a story that moves people? Either moves people for a call to action, moves people to buy something, moves people to believe in something, or if you're trying to move people to inform them of something. So storytelling is how we convey that message. And it goes back to the olden days where we used to sit around a campfire and tell stories before radio, before television, before all of these things. We used to sit and tell stories to one another. So doing it in today's world is just using technology, videos, content, TikTok, Snapchat, news, podcasts to tell those stories.
Okay, so when it comes to PR, normally you guys study the traditional and the new PR, or how it works? Because right now it's more focusing on digital PR, but back in time you're talking about radio, TV, and everything. So you have everything.
Yeah, I think the way people consume information has changed. So we used to sit down and watch the evening news, and now you want to find out breaking news, you go probably to your Twitter feed and find out what's happening. So the way we've consumed it has changed, but the information we need to say hasn't really changed at all in terms of communications tactics. So I still listen to the radio, I still watch TV, I do spend more time on my mobile and doing things through my phone. However, this whole traditional versus digital is just basically trying to evolve how we're doing our communications. So today you need to be prepared to do the full gamut. You can't just do digital, and you can't just do sort of the traditional media outlets. You really have to know how to tailor your communications to those outlets. For example, here in the UAE, The National, they have their own social media channels. So they need content tailored for their Instagram account at the same way for their YouTube channel as they do for the print edition of the newspaper and the online version of the newspaper.
Wow, very interesting. And also you are in the same time an entrepreneur. You start your own a PR firm, So how it feels for you as a woman starting your own startup?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. So I didn't set out to be a female entrepreneur. I'll be really honest with you. The first time I decided to do a startup was in 2000, which was almost 20 years ago. There weren't a lot of female founders out there starting their own businesses. The only reason I did embark on that journey is I really wanted to be in control of what I did every day. And I didn't know how to run a business, know how to do finances, HR, all those hats. You just kind of figured it out. Of course, I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I had no idea what I was doing, but I learned really quickly how to, build a business around things that I believed in. So I believed in communications. I believed in helping people communicate better. And I really believed in adding value to my clients. And that's really how I started to grow my business.
Wow. Also, very important point you mentioned about failures, because we have to tell the truth. It's not everyone thinking it's easy. It was you can make.
The mistakes I could make, I cannot count on my hands. But I just did a talk last week about failure because people don't talk about it enough.
Yes.
They want you to get up and talk about how great you are and how you didn't have any mistakes in your career. That's how you learn. Is from those failures, is from the mistakes that you make. That's experience.
Yes.
So I think it's important to talk about, being a startup or an entrepreneur is not for everybody. You are going to fail. And sometimes you have to understand, okay, maybe this isn't for me. It might be either the wrong business line I'm in, or I shouldn't be an entrepreneur. Some people aren't made to be number one. Some people are made to be number twos or team players instead of leaders. It really depends on what you feel you're strongest at and then leaning into that.
Wow. And how you decide in 2011 to make that move to Google, and since your startup is actually running and growing?
Yeah, so I had my company. I was an entrepreneur. I was in control of my day every day, and Google had approached me for a job, and at the beginning I was like, I don't really want to join a company. And for months we were in discussions, and they're like, come join Google. And to be honest with you, this was back in 2010. This is a long time ago. I mean, Google's obviously a huge and behemoth company today. It was back then, but not as big as it is now. And, the thing that switched it for me in my mind, the more I learned about the company and what they do, and they were really advocating for freedom of expression and giving access to information and equalizing the playing field by giving more people access to knowledge. And what did it for me was I really wanted to be in a position to give back more to the region. So if I can help businesses get online to help their economic growth and opportunity by giving them access to the internet. If I can help create more Arabic content online. So when people would Google something and they couldn't find it in Arabic, that's really frustrating. So we wanted to really be in a position to help people get more Arabic content online. Third, I really wanted to be in a position to help Google in the US understand the power of the Middle East region. Half of the population is under the age of 50, or 50% of the population is under the age of 25. We're very mobile centric. We're very young generation who adapt technology. And at that time, Google hadn't launched Google Maps in Arabic. YouTube wasn't launched in the region. So I was going to be in the front seat to really work with all my colleagues to really make a difference for the region in terms of the internet and in terms of what people were doing online.
Okay, and how you feel about the Google Media Academy and training more than...
Yeah, that was actually a pioneering program. I'm super proud of it. Yeah. I'm actually surprised you found that somewhere in your research. So you did your homework.
Of course, yes.
So one of the things I did when I was at Google was I created this program called the Google Media Academy. And it's basically a program to educate the press and help do training for them on all the tools that they need to do their stories for the media. So a lot of news organizations don't have budgets to train their people. So we said, why don't we do it as Google? So we'll bring them in and we'll host a workshop. All they have to do is bring their laptop. We'll teach them how to embed a map in their story. We'll give them tools on how to do data mining and searching on Google. We'll help them figure out how to use YouTube in their stories or really create content on YouTube. We trained 6,000 journalists across the Middle East over a course of several years. But it was a pioneering program where we really got to give them digital skills for their news, and we didn't really want anything in return in terms of, coverage. It was purely relationship building and purely a program set up to help give them skills to give them, a competitive advantage when they're doing their news reporting.
Wow. And how you feel about, honestly, that time? Because I feel in 2011, traditional media doesn't believe so much on online because everything was print, everything was digital, satellite and everything. So how actually convince them to believe in digital? And
by the way, it was a huge leap, especially in markets like Egypt. So, Dubai is very English speaking, email, centric work environment. In Egypt, it's really, there's a lot of press in Egypt. Egypt is the mothership when it comes to the Middle East in terms of exporting news, media, film. So, to really penetrate the journalism industry in Egypt was a really big challenge, because they have very traditional ways of working, and we were very digital, so it wasn't something that they were obviously attuned to or used to. But we worked really closely with the journalism syndicate and a lot of the media in Egypt to say, we want to help upskill and give you guys the tools you need to be 21st century, newsrooms. And so it was harder in Egypt, but it was really rewarding because we were really adding a lot of value to them.
Wow. And also after that, you go back to your companies, in 2014, and you work with a lot of major brand. How it's different actually to have that experience, and working with major brand, because when it comes to communication, it's different than you work with one country or you work, for example, with the region itself. There is a different requirement, there is different regulations. So how the strategy of communication make difference?
Yeah, I think, for example, we can talk a little bit maybe about Netflix or Kareem and some of those companies. So what you need to do is think about not what's important to the company, but what's important to the consumer. Mm-hmm. And then the company helps figure out what's the best way to talk to that consumer. So you have to be thinking of the consumer first, what messages resonate with them, what's important to them. So a lot of time, big lofty goals come up in campaigns and ideas of, we should be doing this, but it doesn't really make sense to the consumer. Yeah. And we think about messages between two people. It's, you want the person to understand what you're trying to convey. And so really working with those global companies to understand, this is how the people in the Middle East think. This is how we think about culture. How do we get close to hearts and minds of people in the Middle East? And that was really my job, is to make that bridge between what they want to convey and how do we make it resonate locally with people.
Yeah. And how you feel especially about Kareem, because this is one of the unicorn of the market here, that you was part of enter them to the market in Egypt, and the same time of the peak of Uber, So how it work when actually you entering local brand, when that's you a global brand dominating the space?
Actually for me, working with Kareem was an extraordinary accomplishment and achievement, or something I'm super proud of. Why? Because it was the first time to be in the pulse of that kind of a startup. The energy, I launched Kareem in Egypt, but I also worked in the Dubai office as well, helping them through a lot of different communications projects and processes. And I just feel obviously the leadership is very strong. I learned so much from Modestar and Magnus. And I think that they had an energy and a pulse that they knew they were solving a big transportation problem for people. If you ask them, they will say they're not done solving that problem, because for somebody to hail a car is a very luxurious thing, and especially in markets like Egypt where there's 100 million people, so you need to solve a massive transportation problem. So them launching Kareem Bus was a great idea. In markets like Pakistan, they have the tuk-tuk, and they have obviously motorcycles and bicycles. So, when you're working on a real hard problem and you're trying to solve a gap for people, it's so rewarding. And I'm just so proud that those guys are obviously a unicorn, and it's inspiring for other people who have a startup in the Middle East to see that the Middle East can produce unicorns, and it's a kind of a North Star for a lot of people around here.
Wow. And also you being part of the launching of Netflix Middle East and Deezer, how it feel to work with a tech company with that size, to bring it to the Middle East?
So I have been working in tech since 97.
Wow.
Since I moved to Egypt. So when I worked for Naguib Sawiris, I launched a lot of the mobile networks in the Middle East. So in the very beginning, when nobody knew what a mobile was, and we were explaining to journalists, this is a GSM network, and here's a microwave station, and we had to deal with helping them understand the terminology of a cell phone. This is the very beginning. First cell phones were entered into the market in 96, I think, in UAE, 95, 96, and then Egypt and all the other countries. So I launched in Tunisia and Morocco and Algeria. I know you're from North Africa. So I've been working in tech for a long time. And so then, after working on mobile communications, I worked a lot with ISP link.net, so we were like entering internet into the market, and then with Google, obviously, the transition to working on Netflix and Deezer were really kind of a continuation because it was content. So I really, obviously video content on Netflix, music content on Deezer. It's exciting. It's exciting to see how these brands want to enter their market. It's exciting for consumers to get these brands. There was a lot of frustration that Netflix hadn't launched yet and the library wasn't available, and then they launched, and now they're really investing in Arabic content. They're doing a tremendous amount of collaborations with local screenwriters and actors here. There's a big production out of Jordan. There's stuff coming out of Egypt. So now they're really trying to play a role in the community, which is super fun to watch.
Wow. And also you serve as like a consulting for the UAE Prime Minister for the Arab Social Media Award.
Yeah, so right when I left Google, I got asked to work on a project for the executive office here in the UAE. And, they get it. They understand that social media is a big thing. And this was, I'm going to say 2013 or 2014, I can't remember. They wanted to basically have social media awards for people who were brands that were doing it well, for people who were using social media for good, for companies that were doing it in terms of like education. So using social media and content to do really good things. And so they wanted to have sort of a recognition awards program. That was the first year, the inaugural year that we did it. It was me and a bunch of people that worked on it, but it was really fun.
And also you work for Al Ghurair Foundation, for education. How is different between working for profit and non-profit,
Yeah, so the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was one of the largest education foundations in the world. Wow. And Abdulaziz Al Ghurair and Abdullah Al Ghurair, who is the CEO of this foundation, decided that they were going to donate
3.1 billion.
A huge amount of money, which basically every year any of their profits are going to go to educating people and providing scholarships. And so the inaugural year of that program, I worked on that with Maisa Jalbout, who was leading that foundation at the time, and really trying to help these kids. We gave scholarships to kids in Syria and people in these war-torn areas that had applied to really get a scholarship to get an education, and they gave away lots of money to put a lot of people through college. And this emphasis on giving back through education and the foundation was super rewarding for me, because I come from a family of educators. My dad was an educator, my aunts, my uncles. So education was a big part of my DNA. So to be working on the foundation was super exciting for me.
Wow. How you feel about the family support when it comes? You tell me your family are from educated space. Is it like your first mentor, or you have other mentor as well?
Yeah, well, my sister is a big mentor for me, my older sister. But my parents played a big, obviously, role in shaping me in my life and helping me kind of become who I am. And Naguib Sawiris is a really big mentor of mine, someone who I really look up to and really, consider someone that taught me a lot and continues to stay close to me and helping me shape my ideas and my future. Their mentors come from everywhere, but the ones that are really close to me are ones that have really kind of understood where to support me and how to support me, and listening to them is really important to me.
For me, as an Arab woman, is really proud to have you here with us, And actually, you was one of the only international-based communication executive to join the White House Spring for President Barack Obama.
Yeah, so they had a program where they wanted people who were experts to help them figure out how to communicate better, and it was a team of people that were selected, 6 people. To just come in and listen to some of their problems and give them some advice. And so that was several years ago, obviously administration before, but in general, I like to help governments. So I've worked with Egyptian government, I've worked with the UAE government, I've worked with US government. Think like companies, think about how you should disseminate your messages, how you should do your storytelling. So having that mentality of the corporate side and helping governments say, listen, if you really want to tell consumers your policy or citizens your policies, you really have to think about the way you communicate. And it could be through cultural diplomacy, it could be through sports, it could be through art, it could be through digital communication. So my role in that project was just to help them understand how people from the Middle East think and what kind of ideas resonate from a cultural standpoint.
I agree with you, because I see recently the last couple of years Dubai pushing on term of brand itself, and now we hear Saudi Arabia. So there is a kind of understanding now from government how important to communicate not just regionally as well internationally.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of things. It's inbound tourism, it's economic opportunity, it's where should I go to set my startup, set up my startup. So I think governments understand the importance of having a good image and a good PR and good value. And so I think it's exciting to see even Abu Dhabi. I don't know if you saw this campaign that happened this last week, and they were Ellen DeGeneres and Jennifer Aniston were giving their users a trip to come to the UAE and come to Abu Dhabi, and that's exciting because we're not talking about these places, and now they really get the importance of inbound tourism and inbound visitors, because it really helps people see how beautiful the country is and to appreciate what's really happening here in the UAE.
Wow. You work also with a lot of celebrity and influencer, when it comes to them image, and one to mention, which is Gary Vaynerchuk. So how it was that experience, and how important for Middle East audience to have that kind of fusion.
Yeah, so you told me you were there in Sharjah.
Yes,
when he came to speak. I mean, it was really exciting. I didn't know who Gary was. I didn't.
To be honest, I'll tell you something. I remember on the event that shirt in Arabic. That Gary was actually astonished.
He had a shirt in Arabic that I made for him, and I gave it to him, and he's like, "What does it say?" And it was one of his quotes that says, "Positivity always wins."
Yes.
Because he's just so positive.
For sure, yeah.
And so the minute I showed it to him, he was like, "Oh, wear it." You loved it, and a lot of people commented on that shirt, and they're like, "Where can we buy that merch?"
Yeah.
Gary's quotes in Arabic. He has an Arabic channel, so you guys can go consume his content in Arabic. Gary V Arabic on Instagram and YouTube and stuff like that. But I didn't know who Gary was. A person I know, she said, you should read this book called Crush It.
Yeah.
And it was the summer of 2017. And I went to buy the bookstore from the bookstore, read the book. It's a very small book, so it was a quick read. I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. And the premise of the book is that if you have value to add and you have something that you can offer, you should, create your own platform and create content. Start creating content. Don't overthink it. Don't judge yourself. The fact that you're thinking about a post and not putting it out there means you're thinking too much about it. So just start. The whole premise is just start. So I was like, oh, I should just start. I see a lot of influencers online doing stuff, and I'm like, but I actually have a very substantial career in communications. Maybe people want to learn some of the things that I've learned, and I can share and educate more. So that's when I decided to come up with Digital and Savvy. It was okay, I'll come up with this blog or this platform, or I'll start writing articles, and one day I'll do a podcast. That's kind of the whole premise of how I started getting involved. So I started consuming Gary's content. So I started following him. And Gary did an interview with this woman called Cy Wakeman, who has a book called No Ego, and she was on air on Gary's show talking about her book, and I was just fascinated by her, and I loved her story. Very long story short, I DM'd her, which I've never done before, and I thought, oh, she's going to think I'm stalking her, but I just appreciated what she had to say, and so I told her. And then a couple of months later, I was talking to the folks from Rise Up in Egypt, and they were like, do you have any speakers that you know of that talk about this topic? And I'm like, well, there's this woman named Cy Wakeman. I'm like, I know her. I mean, I don't know her, but I know she might be, a really good person. Maybe I can ask her. Yeah. So they said, okay, we'll reach out. So I did. I sent her a message, and then I sent her a thing saying, can I send you an email? Send her a formal email so she knows who I am. I'm not, a stalker. I really actually want to talk to her about a business opportunity. And she said yes. She said yes to having a call with me. And it goes to show, if you get an opportunity, try to say yes more than you say no. And so she came to Egypt. She ended up coming to Egypt. She spent a week, magical week in Egypt. She gave like a brilliant keynote. She did a workshop. It was a love affair between her and Cairo. So I was so happy she came. And she had a videographer that was with her from Vayner Talent, which is one of Gary's companies. And he was filming, and I said, oh, next time I come to the States, I'd love to get to meet someone from Gary's team. And so that's basically how it happened. He introduced me to Alex DeSimone, who was Gary's business development person at the time. Yeah. And so I said, I'd love to meet Gary. He's like, okay, well, he wants to meet me first, obviously, to see who I am. Yeah. And then he's like, well, can you stay tomorrow and meet Gary? And I'm like, actually, I can't because my sister has a big event. I got to go. And so long story short, I stayed and I met Gary. And then we just connected. And I was like, I really want to bring you to the Middle East. You need to come to Dubai. You need to come to the UAE. You need to come to Egypt because I'm so proud of the region. So I really want you to come do business here. That's the premise of how it all started. And then we spent a lot of time together. And then the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival was coming up. And so I know them and they were looking for speakers and I know Gary. So made the connection and he came and it was just like super awesome. Like it was probably it was probably one of the funnest business trips I've had with Gary. And so anyways, that's the story of how I know Gary, and now I do some work for him, and it's been fun since.
I'm sure really like that was one of the events I could remember because for people in the Middle East, maybe they see him or not, but people was expecting just the boring speaker on the stage, and people was like surprised in terms of his energy and terms of like talking his own way,
Yeah, his tone in that keynote was much different than he normally does.
Of course, yes.
Because he just like really respects the people in the region and really wanted to have an honest conversation and talk about things that people don't normally talk about, and he just killed it. Like it was such an emotional talk, and I remember that one. I've seen Gary speak a lot. That one stands out.
That one stands out
for sure.
Yeah, and also before that event, because for me I'm a big fan of Gary V, and his really like way of educations, because there is a lot of different when it comes to motivation speakers where you have to buy courses to access to proper knowledge. He doesn't sell anything, and that's something really in terms of like why I listen to his stuff, because he give you in terms of like the right tools that he have in his experience, and then you have to do it in yourself. So it's
and he's just super genuine. Like it's one of the reasons why I like spending time with him and hanging around him is because he doesn't sell things to people.
And he's a big believer on do it differently, because before that event, I see starting actually doing Arabic subtitles. So I say, why I'm seeing like Gary V doing Arabic content?
Look at that. Yes. He's investing in Arabic content. He's the only motivational speaker, CEO, entrepreneur at his scale in the US and globally that's doing his content in Arabic. Yes. So you won't see like Tony Robbins or any of those other big names or even CEOs of companies putting out their content in Arabic. So he's totally investing into the market. He's got a massive following in Saudi, massive in Egypt, big in the UAE. His podcast, I think, is #1 in the UAE. So like he cares about this region and helping make a difference. And so he's investing a lot in his Arabic content. He just launched his YouTube channel this week in Arabic. I don't know if you saw that, but he's just going to continue to grow because he thinks that, the more he can communicate with people in their language, the more impact it can have.
That's very true. So actually, Gary V Arabic is more as a platform about Gary V in Arabic for Arabic audience, right?
It's all of his content just in local language.
Wow. And I see the growth is very fast. So people actually love to consume on Arabic content. Yeah,
I posted on my Instagram that Gary has a channel in Arabic if you guys are interested in Arabic, and then a lot of people DM me saying, oh my God, it's amazing that he has it in Arabic now, and the Arabic is actually very good because it's his words, but in really, it's very hard to do good Arabic. So it's very, very, very exciting.
So it could be actually Arabic can be bridged for many like influencers around the world if they really think on that aspect.
Yeah, and it's for Arabic speakers around the world. There are a lot of Arabic speakers in France and in the US and for people in other parts of the world. So it's just making sure that he's speaking to people in a language that they want to consume in.
So I want to ask you now about like when it comes, for example, like to your digital savvy show. You know, how you feel about that show and what is the purpose behind it?
Yeah, like I told you before, like when after I read Gary's book, I'm like, I should create a platform. And I was like, I don't know how to do it, but I'll just start. Like I'll start with the blog, I'll write some articles. And then I really, really believe in voice. So I'm like, I need to create a podcast. And what's a podcast going to be about? Well, communications, because that's what I'm passionate about, and that's what I do. So that's basically the premise of what we did. And the reason I called it Digital and Savvy is we want people to feel, it was kind of two sides to me. So one is how can we help people communicate, and communicate digitally is one things that people want to know more how to do, especially when it comes to PR, and how to be savvy about communication, savvy as a girl boss, savvy as a business person, savvy as an entrepreneur. So it's going to be more than just communications. It's going to be about other things.
This is very interesting, and I watch like most of your interview because I'm a big fan as well of I'm digital savvy myself. You know, and this is how actually I learn about you. And at the same time, I want to ask you: you meet with a lot of influencer and entrepreneur to your show. How you feel as an expert in communication? Them awareness about how to tell the story and communication.
Pretty good. I mean, a lot of the people that I've been talking to are very accomplished in their careers, so they wouldn't get where they were if they weren't good at communication. So leadership has a lot to do with how you communicate, internally and externally. Like if you're going to be a CEO of a company, you have to know how to communicate to investors, to the media, to consumers, to stakeholders, to your employees. So these people get it. And I think that's one of the rewarding things to sit with them, is to understand what was their secret sauce, or how did they do it, what was their journey in their careers, because they're all very different people in what they do in different industries and verticals. But I think a communicator's job never ends, because you know it evolves. And like one of the things I talked about when I recorded this morning was the importance of internal communications in a company. Like, it's always been seen as the job that no one wants to have. Like, everyone wants to be the external PR person and deal with the press and organize the events. But internal comms always got a bad rap of like the boring job. By the way, it's the most important job, because internal communications is all about the culture. It's about engaging with the employees. It's about building transparency. It's about growing trust. And leadership has a really big role in making sure people understand internally what's happening in the company. And especially, you don't have to work for a company. You can be an entrepreneur and do something else. So you have to create that culture and that environment at work that people want to be a part of it. So internal communications takes center stage in that.
Yeah. Yes, so this is really interesting. I really like admire the episode with the CEO of Do. Very interesting episode.
Yes.
Because I was now have chance to see the real story behind. So how you select your guest when it comes to your show?
How do I select my guests when it comes to my show? Well, first of all, it's like people that I know. So I try to just like talk to people that I know and say, were you willing to be coming on my show? And I also try to pick people who have an interesting story that might have not been told before. So Janan, who paints bags, like she's an entrepreneur without really, you know, having built a business as an artist, thinking that she's going to have her own company. You know, Ghizlan from The Modist, she's built a whole niche of a multi-billion-dollar industry of modest clothing and modest fashion. Yeah. I thought that was an interesting story that hadn't been told widely to my audience. Osman is someone that I respect deeply. Yeah. Somebody who has built 2 successful mobile operators, yeah. $2 billion companies. There aren't a lot of those around. Yeah. And so I really wanted his story to be told, and we know each other, we trust each other, so he knew that I would tell a good job of making sure, you know, his story was told. And we go back a long way, back from 1998. Yeah. So I just felt like, for me, it was a full circle moment to interview him, because I just respect him so much. Yeah. Gary, obviously, was my first episode, because, like, who doesn't love Gary, including me? Yeah. So I picked some guests that are coming up for 2020 that have interesting stories, but also have a communications edge to them that's interesting. So trying to bring that piece to the puzzle as well.
Yeah. Do you think as well, part of your show, maybe some workshop for media space and PR savvy?
There's one actually coming up January 17th and 18th. It's a 2-day kind of boot camp.
Okay.
So the first day is going to be about you, like how you can be better as a communicator, your personal brand, your digital reputation, what you can do to polish yourself as a communications person, or communicate better at work, or on your own social media, because communications is never going to go away. It's something everybody needs to know how to do. So the first day is basically you. And I put it as the first day because I think that's the most important thing you should do, is invest in yourself. Yeah. The day 2 is kind of more like, okay, I really want to know how to be a PR ninja. Like, what's the PR toolkit for startups? How do we pitch to the media? What are messages? What's the best way to do storytelling? It goes a little bit more deeper dive into that. So that's January 17th and 18th, and we're going to be putting the information out on how to register for that. So it's the first boot camp I've done for that long, 2 full days. You can either register for one day or both days, but like I told you, come from a family of educators, so like this is going to be super fun for me to educate people on all things comms.
How it felt to work with Najib Suarez, or Ascom, one of the region's respected entrepreneur, in telco and media. How it goes, that experience, because I want to share the story with our audience.
Yeah, I got really lucky. So Naguib is, like, for me, very special to me. Actually, it was so funny because I just moved to Egypt and I didn't know anybody, and I was trying to find a job. And at that time, you either worked at like the Coca-Colas, the Unilevers, the P&Gs, like the multinational companies, or you worked for one of the big family businesses in Egypt. Yeah. And I didn't know anybody because I just moved there and I didn't have a college gang, or I didn't grow up there, so I didn't know anybody literally. And I interviewed with Naguib, and he offered me a job to be his office manager. And I was like, that's like a terrible job. Like, who would want to sit and answer phones and schedule things? And I was like, I'm overqualified. I shouldn't be an office manager. I was mortified. I'm like, that's not a good job. Like, I have a master's degree. And I was so like, how dare you offer me an office manager job? But I went home that night and I told my dad, I'm like, Dad, I got this offer for this office manager job. And he's like, you should take that job. I'm like, what? And he's like, you should take that job. He's like, you don't know anybody. You just moved here. You need to learn. You need to start from ground zero. There's nothing beneath you. It doesn't matter what your degree is. If I were you, no matter what the pay is, I would take the job to get experience. You just moved here and you need to learn everything. And so you should learn it from the best. So I did. And quickly after joining the company, obviously Nikki was like, okay, I think she can do more than be an office manager. He really invested in me and trusted me and threw me on the deep end of the pool several times, like gave me challenges. I really had no idea what I was doing, but I figured it out. And so it was an extraordinary time in Egypt's history because he was introducing mobile phones into the market, and nobody knew what a cell phone was. And they came up with a campaign called "We're going to put a mobile in every hand," and everyone's like, in every hand, like drivers and like all these people. And Egypt is 100 million people. That's a lot of phones. And he realized the dream. Like, now everybody has a phone in Egypt, and it worked. And he created a lot of jobs and transferred a lot of technology and was a pioneer in his time for what he did. And I just actually was with him at the Guna Film Festival recently, a couple months ago in Egypt, and now he's leaning into other things he's passionate about: media, technology, film, entertainment industry. So
we have like a major woman audience on our platform, and for sure Maha, she mentioned about how she get in touch with Gary Vee, and even she's an expert of communication. She said the story that she DM, so how important for this female who watching, an entrepreneur, that not afraid from rejection, because there is nothing always yes directly. You have to give a try, ask questions, sending email. Even there is no answer, you should try again and again. It worked.
Yeah. Oh God, how many times have I been rejected in my career? A lot. Like, it's just part of the job. But you either have to figure out when to be persistent and when to like move on to something else. Yes. If you really believe in something, don't say no. Don't give no to don't take no for an answer. It's actually an interesting story. One of the co-founders of Netflix told the story that he had applied for this job. Him and like 4 other guys had applied for this job. And they were all told no. Wow. And the person that was doing the interviewing said, we wanted to see which person wouldn't take no for an answer and come back and say, well, why didn't I get the job? What could I have done better? What are some of the things I should be doing in order to get a job with a company like you? And because he actually went back and challenged and said he wouldn't take no for an answer, he got the job. So it's just that kind of a story of like highlighting for you, like, you know, don't take no for an answer. If you really believe in something, stick to it. But rejection is part of what happens, and you just have to not take one failure or one rejection as a setback. It's just an opportunity for you to be doing something else.
I think now we are almost like a few weeks from the new year.
Yes.
So how you feel about the Expo 2020 happening here in Dubai? And
I really want to go see the site. I had an opportunity to go, but I was traveling, so I couldn't go. It's super exciting. First of all, I love the positioning, the world's greatest show. It just sets expectations that we're going to see something we haven't seen before. I thought it was genius. You know, Dubai is always doing things at the next level. Always raising the bar, always thinking about the future, always thinking about being the best government or being one of the fittest cities. So it is no question that this event is going to really let people see really what Dubai is all about. I'm very excited for the UAE in general. Mm-hmm. You see all these countries investing in their platforms and in their pavilions. So I'm super excited to see what's in store. I don't know much about what's going to take place. I'm like you, we're going to find out when it happens.
As a communication expert, you see right now the trending onto the audio space, which is like going back to our roots, you know, people listening because they don't have time to watch. So what is your opinion when it comes to audio content?
So a couple of things. One is like you see podcasting growing, even in the Middle East, podcasts are growing. It's a really creative way to tell stories. People are sitting in the car, people are sitting in the airport, people are sitting on the treadmill, at the gym, working out. So there's a lot of what we call white space time when people have time to be listening. And it's easy. Like you don't sometimes have time to sit down and watch a video, but you can easily pop in a podcast while you're studying or when you're commuting to Abu Dhabi from Dubai or that type of thing. So I think that's only going to continue to grow. I think brands are doing such a great job in understanding how to use the podcast platform to tell stories. I think a lot of brands are thinking too about voice assistants, about skills, about ways to do voice-activated search, and even sonic branding. So how you can, what is your brand supposed to sound like? When you go into a store, what's that sound? Like Emirates, the minute you hear the you know you're in Emirates Airlines. Yeah. Like, so that's a sonic brand. Yeah. So for example, so I think everyone's going to start to think about less friction, and audio does that for people.
So thank you so much for being with us today. We learned a lot, and I'm sure there is a lot more to talk about, and we'd love to help you in upcoming episode.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.